I'm wondering whether my next guest wishes rather he was at Cheltenham in preference to being here with us in our studios in West London. He is, of course, the man that has made the character of Jim McDonald in Coronation Street since 1989, one of the most recognisable in British drama. He is Charlie Lawson. Charlie, great to see you.
Great to see you too, Nick. And I actually sacrificed my watching of the racing yesterday, driving down to see you. Well, I could have been watching it. I wouldn't have been there. But
we are very honoured. It's fair to say that racing's played a pretty important part in your life, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I started off with ponies, you know, and all I wanted to do was go flat out. You know, my sister wanted to join the pony club, but I just wanted to get from A to B as quick as possible. We grew up watching Peter O'Sullivan in Grandstand, you know, every Saturday, and the ITV7 latterly, and I've been a horse racing fan since the days of Ron Barry and the Dikler and Spanish Steps and all these old horses, go seeing them around the National. And so really, yeah, it's been a part of my life, and it would be, I mean, some people might think it's obvious, but one of the best things I do in life, probably better than an actor, is ride. You know, I'm a better rider than I consider myself to be an actor.
And have you done much riding in your working life?
Do you know what? I spend my time watching actors looking like Buck Eagets on horseback, you know what I mean? And I think, well, he can't ride. I know him. He's a big wuss or whatever. And I have never, ever in all my career, probably because I'm always filmed in a bar beating the you-know-what out of someone, and I'm not in the, you know, I'm not in these posh jobs where I'm required to ride a horse. But yeah, I do it better than anything else, really.
Of course, you were in posh jobs before Coronation Street came along, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I joined full time in 1989, but in 1980, or a couple of years before that, I was at the National Theatre, don't you know, love? And I was asked to come into the street. And I'm ashamed to admit, I was so po-faced about the whole idea of joining a soap. I didn't know who anybody was, and I wasn't interested in doing that funny thing from the north. As I say, were many other actors and actresses. I mean, now, of course, Ian McKellen has done it, and every other Tom, Dick and Harry, because they realise and respect that it is one of the greatest things that's ever been on television.
When you joined in '89, did it immediately feel like home? Did you think, well, this is me, or was it a more transient?
No, it felt really weird because it's a different parallel universe. In those days, there were still stars. I mean, Pat Phoenix had left, but you know, there was only it was only on twice a week, and there were only
was it Tuesday and Thursday? Was it in those days?
I don't know, Wednesday and Friday, whatever.
Yeah.
But you know, and there was only 4 channels, so we were getting between sort of 15 and 20 million people, so half of Britain knew who we were. And there were still stars. I mean, the first day I walked in, I sat in the wrong chair, you know, and Brian Mosley said, "You can't sit there, that's Jubilee Goodyear's chair." And stuff. It was all a bit silly, but anyway, there you
go. What was it like immediately being recognised by everybody?
Bizarre, really. I mean, the press office, Alison said to me or whatever, she said, "Look, if you've got any skeletons, Charlie, and I think you've a few, they're all going to come out." And I had a bucket full of them. So that's the first thing that happens. Your life changes completely. Privacy goes. And in those days, the press, God bless them, they could do and say anything they wanted. Since Levinson, it's got a bit better. But in those days, they were just starting to hack your phones and all sorts of carry on. So you were fair game every Friday and Saturday night. But having said all that, the becoming famous is infinitely nicer than not. I mean, that's when racing took off for me. I was able then to just phone up a race course and say, "I've got Sarah Lancashire on my arm here, who played Raquel," or whatever, you know, and we just got into races, and we were racing from, I remember sharing the box, the Smurfit box at the King George, when Eddie fell off Barton Bank. Is that right? Have I got that right?
That's right,
sorry,
94,
Eddie.
yeah.
I'm sorry, mate. One of the nicest boys in racing.
Adrian Maguire at the last.
Yeah, and we were in the sponsors box. So, but then we were able to go to Cheltenham. I was a member at Stratford, Bangor, all these wee tracks that the McCains used to go to, and I used to go to Ginger's. Got photographed with Rummy. You know, and I got great tips from, you know, I was on Hay Cottage at 66 to 1 whenever it won round Ascot, and you couldn't bloody see it in the fog. and we backed it in and went in at about 33-1, and we'd got that. So great stories and great opportunities it's given me in racing.
And a great release for you from from the pressures of the day job.
Nobody gives a monkeys about you at maybe at Cheltenham Festival. They probably do, because an awful lot of people there, unfortunately, don't really know a lot about racing. As you know, it's changed a lot. But certainly in the smaller tracks, it's a haven of peace, because people are more concerned about their horse and where their money's going than some idiot from the telly.
Because you portray such a recognisable character, everybody knows or knew or knows Jim McDonald and the catchphrases and the way he intones everything. Did you find it endearing or annoying when you would get repeatedly approached in the street? Jim McDonald, so you are, etc. Yeah.
I mean, no, back home I'm Charlie, and they're very proud of me, and that's lovely. I've only ever had one incident in a bar where action had to speak louder than words. Most of the time, they'll say it once, and then you'll say, "No, my name's Charlie." If they persist, then that's when they become a pain. But most of them just apologise and say, "Sorry, Charlie, nice to meet you," and I've had many's a good night out and a few pints with good people. And as the nature of the character he was, you don't really get a hard time.
Did you love the character?
Yes, I did. I thought he was a brilliant character, and I thought the writers, given that they were thrown this time bomb, they didn't know. They were 4 months ahead, and they didn't know there was a Northern Irish man going to come in, So all my bloody stuff was in Mancunian, and whatever. And so I started putting, instead of saying good morning, I'd be saying, "What about you?" So all the writers didn't know what the hell was going on. So between them learning and me, we had 10 good years out of 11. We agreed to part company, and I am reliably informed I am the most returned actor to a soap, having playing the same character.
So you've come back 9 times.
I think it's 8 or 9 or something. Yeah.
And what's the likelihood of a return?
Well, he's in Australia at the moment with his girlfriend.
Sounds nice.
Yes, and she's about 25, and that was a storyline.
I'd stay there if I were you.
Well, it was some people didn't like it, because what happened was I'd signed on to play Rebus in the world premiere of Ian Rankin's Inspector Rebus on stage, and then Corrie came for me and said, "Look, we'll offer you this." I said, "I want to work with Rankin and play Rebus, for God's sake, And so Corrie then said, "Okay, we'll squeeze this storyline." That was in 2019, I think. So it was kind of a Marmite storyline, and he left, and he went back to Australia, and who knows what might happen, As long as the character's alive, then there's a chance he might be back. I don't know where he'd fit in nowadays, though.
Have you still got your enthusiasm for acting?
Oh God, yeah, that's what I'll do. I'm 62, Nick, and I'll be doing this till I'm 82. You don't retire as an actor.
I mean, you look incredibly well. I know you've had difficulties with your health in the last few years. You had a mini stroke on stage.
I did, yeah, on stage. Everything went blue. I went deaf, and the next thing I knew, I was in the wings, hospital and all that. But 20 minutes later, I was okay. But I went in for the scans, and I did a TIA, which I won't bore you with the Latin name, but is indeed a mini stroke. And it set me back for about... for about 6 months, I was emotionally useless. If you showed me Desert Orchid winning the Whitbread, I would have been in floods on the floor. I couldn't control my emotions at all. And somebody said, "Charlie, why don't you go and see help?" And I'm a pretty sanguine guy, you know what I mean? But I did. And after a couple of chats with this lovely lady, I was fine, and I'm health-wise never been fitter.
You mentioned Desert Orchid winning the Whitbread, and I'm guessing you mentioned that because he was a horse that had particular there we are, as if by magic. We don't just throw this together.
No.
A particular emotional resonance for you. Just tell me why.
I was delighted that David Ellsworth got that award, because Elsie this horse here was a supreme athlete. He won every distance, carrying huge lumps of weight, and he had to battle, and he did battle up the hill here. Great commentary. But Elsie kept him fit. I think he had corns in his early years, But he to me, and I know the other Mr. McGrath from Timeform would close his eyes and say, rubbish. You know what I mean? Because I think if you look at his stats, look at how many races he ran in, for how long, carrying lumps of weight for years and years and years. To me, he's the greatest equine specimen, greatest racehorse that we will ever see. And I know Frankel is Frankel and Secretariat and all the rest of it, but over the jumps, to me, he's the best. I mean, everybody says, Jim would say, well, of course, they had to change the handicap system for Arkle. Well, I think Desi, on his day, would give Arkle a great run round Kempton.
There was certainly something of the real folk hero about Desert Orchid, wasn't it? I don't think I'll ever see again in my lifetime. I think just because the sport moves on and it's not quite as close to popular culture as it was in the late 80s when you were there and I was there at Kempton. But the way that the public cleaved to this horse was amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, we forget Colin Brown. Colin started off on him and Mr. Sherwood. Hopefully we'll see you at Ludlow, Sherwood, if you mind returning my emails. But, Simon did great. Simon, let that horse do what it wanted to do. Some say that's very brave, others say it's foolish, but Simon did a great job. And then, of course, Mr. Happy Man, Mr. Dunwoody took over, and as we all know, the greatest cheer he got was when he got up from his final fall. He lit the nation up sporting wise, and I'm delighted that David Ellsworth has been recognised not only for his flat and jump stuff, but to me, and Richard Burridge, great credit to them all for letting us have Des for so long.
And so for you now, does racing still hold the same fascination, the same fixation as it did in the 80s and 90s?
Yeah. I don't go to the course as much because I don't get as many invites, and so I would go to the Beecher Chase meeting rather than the big meeting. I would go to the Countryside Day at Cheltenham rather than the festival. The festival is brilliant if I'm a guest, and I'm not fishing here, folks, it's just the truth. Because if I'm out down there, I can't get to see a race. There's no use me going into the Arkle bar and trying to watch the race. I just can't, or into the Senator or whatever it is, Centaur, because you just get completely mobbed. But see, on a quiet day, it was 33,000, still a great crowd at Cheltenham.
Fantastic.
But it holds 60 or 66, and it's an infinitely nicer for me. But I'm happy at Stratford, I'm happy at Hereford, I'm happy at Sedgefield, Cartmel, Uttoxeter, Haydock, my local, you know what I mean? Uttoxeter, I love. So all of them really. Racing is brilliant, and I wish I'd been at Leopardstown. That to me, Frodon was one of the greatest performances. Not simply because he jumped them into.
You mean Down Royal?
Down Royal.
You're local.
Excuse me.
You're local.
Forgive me. But at Down Royal, the horse came back at him, and I think stuck his head in front of him, and Frodon battled on and won. I thought that was a great performance. And if he gets it right, Mr. Nichols on the King George, watch him, because he'll be there or thereabouts. I
mean, so growing up, were Down Royal and Down Patrick part of your life? Would you go quite regularly?
No, because I grew up, you must remember I grew up in the 70s and all that lot back home, and there were more things in my parents' mind than going racing, and they weren't really interested anyway, so I would watch it on the TV, and then latterly...
So did it skip a generation? Was it from your grandparents really then, from your interest?
No, it just came out of me.
You just loved it.
I mean, my mother and father weren't really into horse racing at all, although they used to go and watch, the young Pat Taff, and my aunt had two horses called Concailey, a racehorse, and Fairgale, who were fair. So my auntie had racehorses with Jimmy Quinn, and Pat Taff rode them. But then you move to my side, and they didn't really give a monkeys. Yeah. So where it came from, I don't know.
And as you say, Enniskillen in the 1970s, there were a lot more pressing concerns on people's minds. What was it like growing up there then?
Well, I left there in '67 because I was sent to boarding school in Belfast, so I was really away all the time. But I mean, you know, my parents had, my father had licence to carry a rifle and a personal protection weapon, a handgun. He had 3 shotguns. There were floodlights outside the house, all that sort of stuff. And I was up in Belfast trying to avoid trouble as best as we could up there, and everybody was touched by it. So I didn't really go racing until properly until I went to, when I was at Guildhall Drama School in the 1980s. I used to not every Saturday, but off I go to Esher to Sandown, and I loved Sandown Park. Also, it's a great race course. So I started really in the early 80s, really going racing all through the 80s, and then of course you arrive in Corrie, the world's your oyster. Everybody wants you to come and visit them. And because you're knowledgeable, you know, I got the opportunity to, thanks to Ginger and his son Don, I got a chance to ride in a race at Wincanton, which I'd always wanted to do, and I did it. I think Venetia might have won it, but I did beat my great pal Brendan Powell.
Did you?
Which I was delighted with. And he never lets me forget it. But I mean, that to me was my biggest achievement of my life so far.
Riding in that charity race.
Because I had to train. I rode out work for Don and Ginger, my 3 lots, Paddington John, Banker's Draft, and Jack Reef, who carted me, and Ginger swore, I'll tell you in a minute. But that was my greatest achievement that year.
Did you think when you finished it, do you think, oh, I wish I'd gone into this and
no,
not trodden the boards?
No, look, no, it's too tough. I was too big, and but although I'd always ridden and always ride, the opportunities that the McCains gave me was brilliant, and they put up with quite a lot. I remember Banker's Draft was the worst horse you could get down to the start. He just walked. You know, everyone was trotting, everyone was moving well, but he came up the gallops like a bat out of hell. And I was up sides, another couple of horses, and pushing through. Anyway, a pedal went and I went down, got a hell of a kicking. And all I could hear, I can't do it on camera, obviously, was Ginger in his own inimitable fashion. Bloody actors! Go and get my bloody horse! But I was, of course, delighted for Donald to take over, and he's had ups and downs, but he's having a great season now, a really good season.
And you know more than anyone that, you know, a career in performance as you've had has so many ups and downs. You could have more work than you can take at one minute, and then
I mean the
next. Temperamentally, that must require an awful lot of you.
It is. Young people who go into the business, you know, a lot of them want to go in and be famous. It's as simple as that. Well, you know, get used to it. You got a lot of rejection. And the last sort of 18 months have been a nightmare. Our industry was flat on its back, never mind on its knees. It was destroyed, and it's coming back slowly. I've hardly worked in the last 18 months. I think I've done 2 or 3 jobs. So I settled down at the beginning of this year after I finished the thing in London to writing my autobiography. And I will have it finished by the end of next week. And then the fun starts, publishers and legalities. It's been a busy old life, Nick. And
it has. Have you found it a good experience to write? Has it been cathartic for you?
It has been a very cathartic experience because I've been back to boarding school and things that happened there, which for legal reasons. It was a tough school, a very sporting school, which was great. But there were things that went on there and in the senior school that I have written about, and I have talked to other boys that it happened to. And more than that, I can't say. But I've written about that. Was an interesting experience. Well, interesting is the wrong word. But then going from that, then getting involved with a couple of loyalist paramilitaries in Scotland. I've had to cover all that. And then, of course, you start in the acting world, and every year tells a big story. And so I think it's a good book, and I think it's a book worth reading.
Sounds as though the lawyers are going to have their work cut out, Charlie.
They are, because what I've done is I have written everything down in truth. I've named names and all the rest of it. which obviously will not, you know, that then you get into the legalities of what you can say and what you can't. But I can safely say, hand on heart, that nothing in there is not the truth.
And
but we'll see what happens.
Do those sort of sectarian issues still weigh very heavily on your mind?
No, not really. I mean, because it was just part of the way I was when I was growing up. I was firmly middle class, but I leant towards the more loyalist side of my, which would have been naturally unionism. I found it. I was far more at home, venturing further to loyalties, so to speak, than middle class unionism. I was at a middle class unionist school, and the snobbery of certain elements of that I couldn't stand. Although I had a brilliant time at school, I have to say.
Such a complex life, such a rich life in many respects. Do you feel sort of at peace with yourself now?
Yeah, there's nothing I wouldn't go back. I live by whatever you want to call it. Above all else, to thine own self be true. And to my detriment professionally, I have lost many, many jobs because I won't compromise in my beliefs. I can get up and look in the mirror and say, yeah, there's not a lot I'd change here. Sure enough, I've been locked up, I've been bad, I've been this, I've been whatever, I've been the front pages, I've been the back page, blah, blah, blah. But I've had a bloody good time, Nick, and there's nothing really I wouldn't do again. And I am continuing to have a good time, and I will continue so to do. And things like this, talking to you about racing, this to me is like, we'll do more. Stick me on a horse somewhere. But honestly, I thank you so much for having me, because this to me is more enjoyable than any bloody Wogan show. Much as Terry was absolutely, you know. One for the teenagers there.
Charlie Lawson, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, and good luck to everybody out. All home safe.
Charlie Lawson, Coronation Street's very own boomerang. You wouldn't bet against him going back for the 10th time. The Autobiography will be out very soon. Thanks to Charlie, thanks to Noel Mead, to Sue Smith. Congratulations to her and her team with Midnight Shadow yesterday. Subscribe to Racing TV to be notified when more Luck on Sunday videos are appearing online. And don't forget to join me for the show every Sunday morning from 9 o'clock with the best guests.